Hi, I'm Jash Subhan, property investor and investment coach. I help everyday people get ahead of the game with property and build wealth the smart way, not the hard way. No hype, just real strategies that work.
Firstly, I appreciate you all being here because most people, they say they want more income, they want more freedom, and they want to do the things they desire to do. But in practice, they don't take the action required to get the outcome they desire. So the fact that you're here puts you ahead of most people. Now, before we get into the training, I want to explain to you what is rent to rent, because there's a lot of misinformation online. Very simply, rent to rent is when you control a property through an agreement with the landlord, then increase the cash flow by renting the room separately or the property professionally. You're not buying the property, you're controlling the cash flow. And the reason so many people are interested in this strategy is because it allows beginners to get started in property without needing huge deposits or owning multiple houses first. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy money. It definitely doesn't mean every deal works. That's why in this training, I'm going to show you step by step the practical side of this business and how it actually works in the real world. Today, we'll cover the numbers you should run before taking any property, how to analyze deals properly, how beginners approach agents and landlords confidently, and the biggest mistakes beginners make that stop them from making their first deal. Now, quick disclaimer before we continue. This training is educational. Property does involve risks. Results depend on your effort, market conditions, consistency, and decision making. Let's get started. So firstly, what makes a rent-to-rent deal profitable? Let's start with the most important thing in property. Not every property is a deal. One of the biggest mistakes beginners make is thinking, if I can rent it, I can make money out of it. That's not entirely true. A profitable rent-to-rent deal usually comes down to 5 things: strong rental demand, healthy profit margins, manageable expenses, good room pricing, and the right property layout. For example, a property renting for £4,000 a month might sound like an expensive deal. But if that same property generates £6,000 a month, and after you pay the bill, it cash flows you £1,500 a month, now that's a good deal. Now that can be a strong deal. Now compare that to a property which costs £2,000 a month as a rent to the landlord, but only generates you £300 a month in profit. One repair or empty room destroys your profit margin. That's why professionals focus on the profit margin. Not emotion, not excitement, and not hype. The numbers. Another huge factor is location and area selection. You want transport links, working professionals, universities, hospitals, strong rental demand. Because if there's no demand, it equals empty rooms. And empty rooms kill cash flow. So remember, a good deal isn't just a property that looks nice. It's a property where the numbers, the demand, and the margins work together properly. Let's talk about deal analysis, because this is the skill that separates the professionals from the beginners. And the process is very simple. First, you calculate the monthly rent the landlord wants. Then, you estimate the realistic room prices and the room income. Not guessed numbers, real numbers, researched numbers. So you go and check online for that location, with that postcode, with the very similar layout of the property, whether it's a house or apartment, with the actual number of rooms in that property, and you see what the market is offering. How much do other landlords and agents list a similar room to the property you're analyzing? So you go and check on Spare Room, on Open Rent, on Facebook Marketplace. Then you compare the prices of the rooms in similar locations. After that, you subtract everything: the rent, the council tax, the gas, electricity, Wi-Fi, void periods, the cleaning, furniture expenses, maintenance. Lots of beginners forget the hidden costs, and that's where they lose money. Now, once you subtract all the expenses, you get your projected cash flow. Personally, I'd aim for between £500 and £1,000 profit per property. Anything too low becomes stressful and difficult to manage. And finally, stress test the deal. Ask, what if a room is empty? What if the bills increases? What if repairs happen? If the property still works, then potentially it's a strong deal. That's how real investors think. Before taking any property on, there's a few key numbers you must understand. Number one, gross income. That's the total monthly income the property has a potential of reaching. So that's the total money in before any expenses, before the rent goes out to the landlord, before any of the bills are paid. Calculating the gross income. How much total income can the property potentially generate? Number two, the total monthly expenses. This includes the bills, the gas, electricity, Wi-Fi, water, council tax, the cleaners costs, weekly cleaning fee, or if you're doing monthly cleaning, any potential maintenance costs you'll need to spend, void periods, anytime the property or the rooms are vacant, any software you're using to manage these properties. And number three, the net monthly cash flow, the money that you have left over after paying all the expenses. That's your profit. Not the turnover, not the revenue, the profit. Now, another key factor you need to take into consideration is the occupancy. Never assume that the property and the rooms will be 100% occupied all the time. That's unrealistic. You need to have a buffer. Take into account. You should always budget for voids and unexpected vacant rooms. And finally, you need to calculate the setup costs. When you first take on the property, you're going to have costs. Things like the deposit you need to pay, furnitures you need to pay for, any locks you need to change, maintenance costs, painting, etc. And the licensing, HMO, property licensing, paying the fee and any other requirements that the local authority requires you to do. And first month's expenses. So getting the property rented, you may need to get other people involved to help you rent and you pay them a commission. This is why I tell people, realistically, you need to have access to £5,000 to £10,000 to get started properly and to avoid the mistakes some beginners make. Because property is a business. You need to invest in your business from the beginning to make sure your foundation is strong. And businesses need structure, reserves, and planning. The more seriously you analyze the numbers, the more stronger your deals become. Number 4, how beginners approach agents and landlords confidently. One of the biggest fear beginners have is, how do I actually speak to agents and landlords? What do I actually say to them? Here's the truth. Confidence doesn't come from pretending. Confidence comes from preparation. Most landlords and agents simply want reliable people. Reliable with professional communication, consistency, and they want low hassle. They don't want more hassle than they have right now. They want it to be a smooth operation. They're not expecting perfection. Most beginners try too hard to try and impress the agent or the landlord. And that's a mistake, because the landlord and the agent are experienced in the property industry. They can tell when you're pretending and that you're not prepared. Instead, focus on sounding clear and professional and being able to articulate and communicate a simple solution to the problems they have. I could call a landlord and, for example, I would say, "Hi, my name's Jash. I work with landlords who are looking for a guaranteed rent solution for their rental properties, and they don't want any hassle and no void periods. I'm looking for properties that work well under my rent-to-rent model." Simple, calm, professional, no complicated lines, and not a sales pitch. Just informative and hits the solution to a problem that the landlord has. And remember, rejection is normal. Most successful property investors hear the word no continuously, but the ones who succeed are the ones who simply continue. And every conversation improves their confidence. And eventually, what once felt scary now feels natural. That's how confidence is built in property. Number 5, the biggest mistake that stops beginners making their first deal. Most beginners don't fail in property because it doesn't work. They fail because of beginner mistakes they make. The first mistake, overthinking. Continuously watching posts and videos and continuously consuming content and information without implementing it. If you are desiring to learn something like property, you need to learn it from all angles. You learn about it, you learn how to do it, you actually do the action, and then you make a success out of it. Now you've learned what you set out to learn. But if you are continuously reading and watching how most beginners do, you will not take any action and will not get to your first deal. The second mistake, fear of rejection. Landlords say no, agents say no, deals fall through. And that's normal. That's part of the process. You need to be able to handle rejection and have a thick skin to go through the quantity of numbers of clients and calls to make sure that you get to the yes. The more no's you get, the closer you are to a yes. And I guarantee you will be shocked when you get your first yes and you sign it up and you take the keys and you realize that you always had the skills inside you to make it happen. You just didn't complete the cycle of going through the process to become skilled enough to follow through. The third mistake, chasing unrealistic deals. Some beginners chase deals which are actually bad deals or look overly appealing. But it turns out the landlord does not want to give it to a rent-to-rent operator, but the agent has a blanket rule, especially the larger estate agents. Blanket rule, they do not deal with company lets or rent-to-rent agreements. You should not spend and waste your time and energy on chasing unrealistic deals. Beginners often try to force every property into a deal when they should realize there is some weak deals which they should walk away from. And finally, trying to do everything alone. The most successful investors have a structure, they have guidance, they have a clear roadmap, and they have accountability. So if you take anything from this training, remember, success in property isn't about being the smartest person. It's about staying consistent long enough to build something real. Information alone doesn't change your life. Implementation does. And the truth is, most people leave a training seminar feeling motivated, but never actually start taking action. That's why for the serious people watching this video, I want to offer you something extra. At the end of this training, you'll have the opportunity to apply for a one-to-one strategy call with me. This is not for everyone. I want to speak to people who are genuinely serious about getting started in property and are ready to take action over the next 6 months. On the call, we'll look at where you are right now, what kind of strategy suits your situation, what's realistic in your situation, and what's the fastest path towards your first or next deal. And if you've already got rental properties under your belt, how to scale to the next level. And if you genuinely feel I can help you further, I'll explain what that will look like. So, if you're serious about building something real and want clarity instead of guessing, click the link below and apply for your strategy call. And I only work with action takers. I appreciate you watching this training video, and hopefully I'll speak to you personally very soon.